The watch could have paid my mother's hospital bill. I returned it anyway, and that was the mistake that placed my name inside a powerful family's private war. By 1:47 in the morning, the coffee at Miller's Diner had turned bitter enough to strip paint. The neon open sign was flickering like it had lost the will to live, and the rain outside was striking the windows in hard silver lines. I had been on my feet for 11 hours. The sole of my right shoe had started separating around midnight, so every step made a soft flapping sound against the black and white tile. I kept moving anyway. Rent was due in 4 days. My mother's latest hospital bill sat folded inside my apron pocket. My 17-year-old sister, Emily, needed $48 for a chemistry lab fee she had pretended not to care about. That was how we survived in our family. We pretended small disasters were too small to frighten us. My name was Hannah Reed. I was 24 years old, worked nights at Miller's, cleaned offices on weekends, and had exactly $83.14 in my checking account. None of that mattered when I found the watch. Booth 7 had been occupied for less than 20 minutes by a man in a dark overcoat who barely touched his coffee. He had sat with his back to the wall, facing the entrance, while 2 men in tailored suits waited near the door without ordering anything. I had served wealthy customers before. Lawyers, surgeons, men who left business cards instead of tips. But this man had carried silence around him like other people carried umbrellas. Nobody came too close. Nobody spoke too loudly. When he left, the 2 men followed him into the rain, and a black sport utility vehicle pulled away from the curb without turning on its headlights until it reached the intersection. I remembered watching it disappear and thinking that some people moved through Chicago as if the city had already agreed to get out of their way. Then I cleared the booth. His coffee was cold. The leather seat was still warm. Beneath the table, half hidden beside the metal leg, something reflected the neon light. I bent down and picked it up. The watch was heavier than it looked. Dark steel. An old-fashioned face. No bright diamonds or oversized logo. Just quiet workmanship, the kind that did not need attention because it expected recognition. The initials TC were engraved on the back. I turned it over in my palm, and my breath caught. My father had owned one good watch in his entire life. It had been inexpensive, scratched, and always 5 minutes slow, but he wore it to every job interview because he said a man should look like he respected time even when time had not respected him. After he died 2 years earlier, my mother sold it to pay the electric bill. I had not thought about that in months. That thing is worth more than your car, my manager, Carl, said from behind me. He leaned over the counter, chewing the end of a toothpick. Maybe more than this whole place. It belongs to the customer from booth 7. The man with the security detail? Carl gave a humorless laugh. Hannah, men like that do not come back for lost property. They replace it. I rubbed my thumb across the engraved letters. The hospital bill in my pocket seemed to gain weight. $3,862 after insurance. I knew the number without looking. I knew every number that stood between my family and sleep. Carl lowered his voice. Sell it. Pay your mother's bill. Buy shoes that are not falling apart. For one dangerous second, I imagined it. The hospital balance erased. Emily's school fee paid. Groceries that lasted longer than Wednesday. My mother opening the refrigerator without apologizing for being hungry. All of it rested in my hand. Then I remembered my father's voice. Desperation explains a bad choice, Hannah. It does not make the choice good. Check the receipt, I said. Carl stared at me. You are serious? He paid with a card. The receipt had already been crumpled beside the register. I smoothed it beneath my palm. The name printed at the bottom was Gabriel Callahan. I knew the Callahan name. Everyone in Chicago did. Callahan Holdings owned hotels, shipping warehouses, construction companies, and enough downtown property to make the skyline feel personal. Its offices occupied the upper floors of a black glass tower near the river. Newspapers called Gabriel Callahan a private investor. People at Miller's used quieter words. Powerful, untouchable, dangerous. I told myself rumors became larger every time they crossed a diner counter. I told myself returning a watch was simple. Find the owner. Hand it back. Walk away. The rain had softened by the time I locked the diner at 2:13. I wrapped the watch in a clean napkin and placed it inside my coat pocket. The last bus would take me within 3 blocks of Callahan Tower, where 24-hour security could accept it. That was the reasonable plan. My phone vibrated as I reached the bus stop. A message from Emily said Mom was asleep, and asked whether I had remembered the lab fee. I typed, "Tomorrow, I promise," then deleted it. Promises looked cruel when numbers were involved. I finally wrote, "I am working on it." The street was empty except for rainwater moving along the curb and a dark sedan parked half a block away. Its engine was running. I could see the faint cloud of exhaust beneath the rear bumper. When the bus arrived, I climbed aboard and took a seat near the middle. The sedan pulled away 30 seconds later. At first, I told myself it meant nothing. At the next turn, it followed us. I pressed my hand over the watch in my pocket. Something moved beneath my fingers. A tiny vibration. One pulse. Then another. I pulled the watch out beneath the dim bus light. The second hand had been still at the diner. I was certain of it. Now it was moving. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was too soft for anyone else to hear, but I felt each beat in my palm. I turned the winding crown carefully. A narrow green light flashed beneath the edge of the face and disappeared. My stomach tightened. This was not only a watch. Somewhere behind us, the dark sedan changed lanes. At the same moment, another black vehicle appeared ahead, waiting near the next intersection. The bus slowed. Both vehicles moved closer. The watch in my hand kept counting towards something I did not yet understand. The bus doors opened at the next stop, but I did not move. The dark sedan had pulled up behind us, and the black vehicle ahead waited at the curb with its lights on. Every sensible instinct told me to remain close to the driver, call the police, and forget I had ever found the watch. Then a man stepped out of the vehicle ahead. He wore a charcoal suit beneath a long black coat despite the hour and the rain. He did not approach the bus. He simply lifted a phone to his ear. My phone rang 1 second later. Unknown number. I stared at it until the driver glanced at me through the mirror. "Miss, are you getting off?" I answered the call. "Hannah Reed." The man's voice was calm and precise. "Who is this?" "My name is Mason Grant. You are carrying property connected to Gabriel Callahan." My fingers tightened around the watch. I was bringing it back. "We know." The watch activated an old Callahan security signal. "Our staff contacted the diner and confirmed your identity through the payment receipt and exterior camera." I looked down at the dark steel face ticking against my palm. The green light was gone. Why does a watch have a security signal? That is a question Mr. Callahan would also like answered. The sedan behind the bus stopped moving. Through the rain-streaked window, I could make out 2 figures inside. Mason looked toward it, and his posture changed. His voice stayed level, but the words came faster. "The vehicle behind you does not belong to us. You need to leave the bus now." I should have refused. I should have called someone. But Emily was asleep, my mother was recovering, and the last thing I wanted was to lead strangers to our apartment. I sent Mason's license plate and my live location to Emily, then stood. I thanked the driver with a voice that barely sounded like mine and stepped into the rain. Mason opened the rear door of the black vehicle. "You can keep your phone," he said. "You can call the police or send your location to anyone you trust. You expected me to think I was being abducted? I expected you to be careful." Behind us, the sedan rolled forward, turned down a side street, and disappeared. I entered the vehicle. Mason sat across from me, leaving more distance than necessary. He was probably in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with the tired eyes of a man who noticed everything and enjoyed none of it. He did not ask for the watch. He only watched my hand remain closed around it. Callahan Tower rose above the river like a blade made of black glass. At 2:38 in the morning, most office buildings were dark. This one was not. Security lights glowed behind the lobby windows. 2 guards opened the doors before we reached them. Inside, polished stone reflected the ceiling lights so perfectly that I could see the damaged sole of my shoe with every step. I suddenly became aware of everything about myself. My damp diner uniform, my fraying coat cuff, the smell of coffee trapped in my hair. Mason led me to a private elevator. There were no floor buttons, only a small scanner. He pressed his thumb against it. The doors closed without a sound. "How much trouble am I in?" I asked. "That depends on how the watch reached you." "It was under a table." "Which table?" "Booth 7. "Who placed it there?" "I do not know." "Who asked you to return it?" "No one." His gaze settled on me. "You found an expensive watch connected to Gabriel Callahan and decided to carry it across the city after 2 in the morning?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was not mine." For the first time, Mason looked uncertain. The elevator opened into a silent office lined with windows. Chicago spread below us in wet gold and red, the streets reduced to glowing lines. A man stood near the glass with one hand in his pocket. I recognized him immediately from booth 7. Gabriel Callahan turned as we entered. Without the overcoat, he looked younger than I had expected, perhaps 33. His suit was dark, perfectly fitted, and untouched by the storm outside. His face held the stillness of someone accustomed to receiving answers before asking questions. His eyes went directly to the watch. "Leave us," he told Mason. Mason did not leave. The second vehicle was not ours. Something cold passed through Gabriel's expression. "Find out whose it was." Mason nodded, then looked at me. "I will be outside." The doors closed behind him. Gabriel and I stood 20 feet apart in a room large enough to hold my entire apartment twice. "Please place the watch on." "The desk," he said. The word please sounded practiced but important. I walked forward and set it on the dark wood between us. He did not touch it immediately. "Where did you get it?" "Miller's Diner. Under the table where you were sitting." "I did not wear that watch tonight." I felt the room become quieter. Then someone left it there. Someone left my father's watch beneath the table I had reserved. His father. The initials. TC. I thought it belonged to you. It disappeared 3 years ago, shortly before my father died. He finally picked it up. For one brief second, his control slipped. His thumb moved across the engraving with the same care I had used at the diner. Then his face closed again. "Who sent you?" "No one. People do not return objects like this for no reason. Honest people do." His eyes lifted to mine. Honesty is usually the reason people give when they do not want to explain their real motive. I reached into my apron pocket, pulled out the hospital bill by accident, then found the crumpled receipt beneath it. His gaze dropped to the bold number printed across the top of the bill. $3,862. I put both papers on the desk. "There is your receipt. Your name was printed at the bottom. You need money. Most people do. Yet you brought back a watch worth more than that bill. Needing money does not make everything for sale." He studied me as though I had answered in a language he understood but did not trust. Then he opened a drawer, removed a checkbook, and wrote without asking my name again. He pushed the check across the desk. $10,000. My heartbeat stumbled, but I did not touch it. That amount could have paid the hospital bill, Emily's school costs, rent, groceries, and the repairs my car had needed for 6 months. Gabriel watched the calculation happen on my face. "Take it." "No, you returned something valuable. That does not mean I sold it back to you. Consider it a reward." "I do not want a reward. Everyone wants something." The certainty in his voice irritated me more than the check. I picked it up, tore it cleanly in half, and placed both pieces beside the watch. Gabriel did not move. Outside the windows, rain slid down the glass between us and the city. "You investigated me before I arrived," I said. "Mason knew my name." "Yes." "Then you already know where I live, where I work, and probably how much money is in my account." $83.14. Heat rose into my face. "You had no right. Someone used my father's property to activate a signal near you. My security team reacted before I understood the situation. My life is not one of your companies. You do not get to inspect it because you are suspicious." His jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Surprise. Maybe no one spoke to him that way. "You are right," he said. The answer stopped me. "That does not undo it." "No, it does not." The office doors opened, and Mason entered carrying a small leather case. "There is a false backing beneath the inner plate," he said. He placed the watch beneath a desk lamp and used a narrow tool to lift the rear cover. A tiny black chip rested inside, no larger than a fingernail. Gabriel went completely still. Mason connected it to an isolated reader. A file appeared on the monitor. Audio only. Date recorded 3 years earlier. Gabriel pressed play. Static filled the room. Then an older man's voice emerged, weak but unmistakably controlled. Gabriel's face lost all color. "Gabriel," the recording said, "if you are hearing this, someone in our family has already betrayed me." The recording continued through a wash of static, and every person in the room seemed to forget how to breathe. "Do not trust the records," Thomas Callahan said. "Do not trust the accounts, and do not assume loyalty because someone shares our name." Gabriel stood beside the desk with one hand resting against its edge. His fingers did not move, but the tendons in his wrist tightened beneath his shirt cuff. Mason watched the audio levels on the monitor. I watched Gabriel. Until that moment, he had seemed built from the same material as the tower around us. Dark glass, steel, nothing exposed. Then his father's voice filled the office, and I saw the sun beneath the name. I found transfers hidden through 3 construction companies. Thomas continued. Money was redirected, contracts were altered, and innocent people were blamed when questions were asked. I tried to correct it quietly. That was my mistake. A sharp burst of interference swallowed the next sentence. Mason adjusted the reader. The recording returned in broken fragments. The proof is divided. This watch contains the first key. The second was placed with someone outside the family. Someone they would never think to search. Gabriel leaned toward the speaker. Who? He whispered, although the man on the recording could not answer him. Thomas drew a slow breath. If I am gone, find Daniel Reed. My body turned cold. The name did not sound real at first. It sounded borrowed. Familiar syllables placed in the wrong story. Then the room tilted beneath me. Stop it, I said. Mason paused the recording. Gabriel looked at me. What is wrong? Daniel Reed was my father. He died 2 years ago. Silence fell so quickly that I heard the faint ticking of the watch beside the computer. Gabriel's eyes moved from my face to the hospital bill, then back again. Your father worked for Callahan Holdings? He was an accountant for Lakeshore Development. He lost his job when I was 14. They said he had moved money from company accounts. He spent 8 years trying to prove the records were false, but nobody listened. Images returned without permission. My father sitting at our kitchen table beneath a weak yellow light. Boxes of papers stacked around his chair. My mother asking him to sleep. His hands trembling as he repeated the same sentence. I did not take anything. I had thought grief made the memory sharper over time. Now it felt like evidence. Mason and Gabriel exchanged a look. I hated that look. It carried information I did not have. Tell me, I said. Gabriel turned toward the windows. Lakeshore was one of the companies my father mentioned in the recording. Then play the rest. Hannah, we do not know what else is on the file. My father's name is on it. Play it. Gabriel faced me again. Power still surrounded him, but it no longer impressed me. Not with my father's ruined reputation sitting between us. He nodded once. Mason restarted. The audio. Thomas's voice returned. Daniel Reed discovered the altered ledgers. He brought them to me instead of the authorities because he believed I would make it right. I asked him for time. While I hesitated, someone used his access credentials to move the final payment. Daniel was blamed. I promised to clear his name. I failed. My eyes burned, but I refused to blink. My father had spent the last years of his life believing the truth had abandoned him. I remembered the interviews that ended as soon as employers searched his name. The neighbors who stopped speaking to us. The way my mother counted every dollar after our savings disappeared. Gabriel reached toward the computer, but I stepped between him and the controls. Do not stop it. Thomas spoke again, softer now. Daniel kept a copy. If they have not found it, the second key may still exist. His family must be protected. They cannot know what he carried. The file ended. No dramatic sound. No final confession. Just silence and the small mechanical ticking of a watch that had waited 3 years to speak. I stared at Gabriel. You investigated me before I reached this building. Did you know who my father was? No, are you certain? Yes. Your family destroyed his name. A company controlled by my family did. That is a careful distinction. His expression tightened. It is not meant to excuse anything. It is meant to identify exactly where I need to begin. Accuracy would have helped 10 years ago. Mason stepped away from the desk and answered a call through his earpiece. His face changed as he listened. Someone accessed Hannah's employee file at Miller's 7 minutes ago. The request came through a private security account connected to an old Callahan network. Gabriel's attention sharpened. Her address. It was included in the file. My heart struck hard against my ribs. My mother and sister are home. I reached for my phone. Gabriel pressed a button on his desk. Send a team toward the Reed residence. No uniforms. No entry unless Hannah approves it. I do not approve anything until I speak to Emily. I called. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, my sister answered with a sleepy voice. Hannah. Lock the door. Check the windows and stay with Mom. What happened? Nothing yet. I need you to trust me. A sound came through the phone. 3 slow knocks. Emily stopped breathing. So did I. Someone is at the door, she whispered. Gabriel held out his hand, not for the phone, but asking permission to speak. I shook my head. Do not open it. I told Emily. Look through the peephole. Several seconds passed. There are 2 men in the hallway. Mason listened to his earpiece. Our people are 4 minutes away. Gabriel's voice became low and controlled. Tell her to move away from the door and remain out of sight. I repeated the instruction. Another knock came, polite this time. Then a man called my name from the hallway. Miss Reed, we only want the property you found. Emily's voice trembled. What property? I looked at the watch. The green light beneath its face flashed again. Once. Twice. Mason disconnected the chip from the reader. The light kept blinking. The beacon is still broadcasting through the old security network, he said. Gabriel picked up the watch and closed his hand around it. Whoever accessed her employee record knows she is connected to the watch, but the signal tells them the watch is here, not at her home. Then they went to my apartment because they wanted my family. The words left my mouth like ice. Gabriel looked directly at me. Your family cannot stay there. Where are they supposed to go? I have a secure house near the lake. They can stay together, and you decide what they are told. Protection without permission is control. Then give me permission. The words landed without arrogance. He was not ordering me. He was asking. That frightened me more because part of me wanted to say yes. I looked at the silent monitor, the torn check, and the watch carrying a dead man's warning. Bring them somewhere safe, I said. They stay together. No one searches their belongings, and no one tells them anything before I do. Gabriel nodded. Agreed. Mason spoke into his earpiece, issuing calm instructions. Through my phone, I heard movement in the hallway and the distant opening of the stairwell door. The men outside our apartment stopped knocking. A moment later, Emily whispered, They are leaving. Relief came slowly, too fragile to trust. Gabriel placed the watch inside the leather case and locked it. Your mother and sister will be taken to the lake house. And me? I want you to come with us. I raised my chin. That is better. His gaze held mine. Hannah, whoever buried this truth knows your name. Will you allow me to protect you while we discover why? Before I could answer, Mason reopened the audio file and isolated a faint sound beneath Thomas Callahan's final words. It was another voice in the room with him, barely audible, speaking only one sentence. Daniel Reed should have kept his daughter out of this. The second voice was quiet, but I recognized the contempt in it before I recognized the man. I had heard that same careful tone in television interviews, charity announcements, and recordings played during company events. Richard Callahan, Gabriel's uncle, the man newspapers described as the steady hand behind the family empire. Gabriel replayed the sentence twice. Each time, Richard's voice became clearer. Daniel Reed should have kept his daughter out of this. He knew about me, I said. Gabriel did not answer immediately. His face had gone still in a different way. Not the cold control he had shown when I entered his office. This was calculation wrapped around grief. You were 21 when this recording was made, he said. Your father was still alive. Richard may have believed Daniel had already given you something. Mason isolated the waveform. The sentence came from farther away in the same room. Richard may have believed Thomas had stopped recording. Gabriel looked toward the leather case. My uncle handled the internal investigation against Daniel. The words struck harder than they should have. Maybe because a part of me still hoped the person responsible would be distant. A forgotten employee. A faceless executive. Not someone who had eaten at Gabriel's table for 3 years while Thomas Callahan's warning remained buried inside a watch. Did Richard clear your father's office after his death? I asked. Yes. Did he tell you the watch was missing? He said it had been taken during the confusion surrounding the estate. And you believed him? Gabriel met my eyes. I believed the man who raised me after my mother died. There was no defense in his voice. Only truth. Somehow, that made my anger sharper. My father trusted your father. Your father trusted Richard. Everyone trusted the person who had the most to gain from keeping them confused. Mason's phone vibrated. He checked the message. Hannah's family is secure. They are being taken to the lake house. Relief moved through me, but it did not settle. I am going there. Gabriel nodded. We all are. The drive north took less than an hour because the streets were nearly empty. I sat in the rear of Gabriel's vehicle while Mason drove. Gabriel remained beside me, separated by a wide leather seat and everything his family had done to mine. Chicago faded behind us. Towers became low buildings. Low buildings became dark stretches of road bordered by bare trees. Rain tapped against the roof with a softer rhythm now. The watch rested inside its locked case on Gabriel's lap. He kept one hand over it, as though it might disappear again. "What happened to your father after the accusation?" he asked. I looked out the window. He fought it for years. He wrote letters. He called people who stopped answering. He kept boxes of records in our apartment until my mother begged him to put them somewhere safer. Where are the boxes now? Gone. We moved twice. My mother sold what she could and discarded what she thought had no value. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Thomas said Daniel kept a copy. My father also said he was innocent. We never stopped believing him completely. We only stopped defending him out loud because every argument cost us something and changed nothing. The truth tasted bitter. I had been 14, angry at the world and angrier at him for failing to fix it. A year before he died, he had placed a small brass key in my hand and told me to keep it somewhere safe. I had slipped it into an old music box because I wanted the conversation to end. Then life had moved forward. Or pretended to. My breath caught. There was a key. Gabriel turned toward me. What kind? Small. Brass. He gave it to me before his final hospital stay. Where is it? My sister has the music box. She keeps letters inside it. Mason looked at me through the mirror. Was it taken from the apartment? Emily packed it in her overnight bag. She takes it whenever we leave home. Gabriel reached for his phone, then stopped. Your permission. The fact that he remembered mattered more than I wanted it to. Call the lake house. Tell them not to open the music box until I arrive. When we reached the property, dawn had begun turning the sky from black to deep blue. The house stood near the shore behind a row of pine trees, large but quiet, built from gray stone and dark wood. My mother sat on a couch beneath a wool blanket when I entered. Emily ran to me first. I held her so tightly she complained that she could not breathe, then held her 1 second longer. What is happening? My mother asked. Her face was pale with exhaustion. Why are we in this place? I looked at Gabriel standing near the doorway. For once, he did not step forward. He let me decide what belonged to my family. Dad may have been telling the truth about the company, I said. My mother stared at me. The room seemed to shrink around us. I knew he did not take that money. Then why did we stop fighting? Emily asked. My mother closed her eyes. Because fighting people with power costs money. We had none. I chose keeping a roof over you over repeating a truth nobody with authority wanted to hear. Gabriel lowered his gaze. That small movement told me he heard the sentence as an accusation, which it was. Emily brought the music box from her bag. It had once been blue, although years had faded it to gray. I opened the lid. The tiny dancer inside turned halfway and stopped. Beneath the velvet lining, my fingers found the brass key exactly where I had left it. Mason examined it. Safe deposit key. Older model. A number was stamped along the side. Gabriel recognized the bank code. First Chicago Trust. Your family owns that bank, I said. Callahan Holdings owns a minority share, he replied. Richard sits on its board. My mother stared at the key. Daniel opened a box there years ago. He added my name to the rental agreement, but he never told me what he placed inside. He said I would understand when the time came. The room went silent. Then you can legally open it, Mason said. My mother looked from Gabriel to me. Hannah, who is this man? I answered without looking away from him. He is the person who has to decide whether his family name matters more than the truth. Gabriel removed a folder from his coat and placed it on the table. No, he said quietly. That decision has already been made. Inside were internal records, account histories, and copies of every file his investigators had found on Daniel Reed. He pushed them toward me. These belong to your family now. You are giving us evidence against your own relatives? I am giving you the choice my father denied yours. For the first time since entering Callahan Tower, I understood where the power had shifted. Gabriel could command guards, companies, and rooms full of people. But my family held the key. We held the records. We held the truth his relatives had spent years burying. Then Emily lifted the music box and frowned. There is something else inside. She removed the velvet tray completely. Beneath it was a folded note written in my father's handwriting. I opened it with shaking fingers. The message contained only one sentence. Hannah, if Thomas fails, Richard will come for the key, and Gabriel will never know why. My father's note should have made me trust Gabriel less. Instead, it made me understand how carefully someone had designed his ignorance. The sentence did not say Gabriel was guilty. It said Gabriel would never know why. That difference followed me back to the city. At 8:30, My mother and I entered First Chicago Trust with Gabriel and Mason. Emily remained at the lake house. The bank's legal officer examined my mother's identification, Daniel's death certificate, and the rental agreement naming her as co-lessee. Nobody opened the vault because Gabriel demanded it. We waited nearly an hour while the documents were verified. That delay mattered to me. For once, his name did not replace the rules. When the bank manager finally led us into a private room, she placed a narrow metal box on the table and handed the key to my mother. Mom placed it in my palm. Your father trusted you with it. The lock turned with a soft click. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive, a stack of copied ledgers bound with a rubber band, and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. My father's letter was 6 pages long. I read the first sentence twice. Hannah, if you are reading this, then I failed to protect you from a truth that was never supposed to become yours. He explained that Thomas Callahan had discovered money moving through false construction contracts. The transfers financed Richard's private network of companies, political favors, and hidden accounts. My father traced them. Thomas promised to expose them after gathering enough proof. Before he could act, Richard used my father's access credentials to create the final transaction and made him the public face of the theft. The last page contained one warning. Do not give the original records to Gabriel unless he chooses the truth before he knows what it will cost him. I lowered the letter. Gabriel stood across the room, close enough to reach the documents, powerful enough to demand them, and silent enough to prove he understood they belonged to us. What does it say? He asked. That I should not trust you yet. Pain moved through his eyes and disappeared. Then do not. Trust what I choose to do next. My mother allowed Mason to copy the files onto an isolated computer while the original documents remained on the table in front of us. The records included account histories, internal messages, and a calendar of meetings between Richard and several company officers. One meeting was scheduled for 6 that evening at the Callahan Hotel. The subject line contained only 2 words. Final transfer. He is moving the remaining money, Mason said. Or destroying the last trail, Gabriel replied. I looked at the meeting list. Owen Callahan's name appeared beside Richard's. Gabriel's younger brother. Does Owen know? I asked. He knows whatever Richard wants him to know. Gabriel closed the computer. You should. Return to the lake house. No. Hannah, that meeting will not be safe. The records belong to my father. Richard mentioned me on the recording. My name is in his plan, and you still think you decide where I stand. I think you have already carried enough. That is not your decision either. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. You are right. Mason looked between us. There may be a lawful way to use the meeting. The next several hours moved quickly. Authenticated copies of the ledgers were delivered to federal financial crimes investigators and Callahan Holdings outside counsel. By mid-afternoon, investigators had verified enough of the records to obtain court authorization to monitor the meeting and preserve any evidence Richard attempted to move. They explained the risks to me in plain language. They offered to keep me out of the room. They showed me the nearest exits and gave me a phrase that would end the meeting immediately. I chose to participate. That choice mattered. By 6 that evening, Richard believed the watch contained the only surviving proof. He did not know about the bank records or the investigators nearby. I would enter carrying a duplicate flash drive and offer silence in exchange for clearing my father's name. Gabriel would appear to accept Richard's demand that I be placed under his control. The plan sounded clean while people described it in a secure office. It felt different when the elevator doors opened on the hotel's private floor. Richard waited at the end of a long conference table. He was silver-haired, elegant, and calm in the way only men who believed consequences belonged to other people could be calm. Owen stood near the windows. He resembled Gabriel, but the warmth had been trained out of his face. Gabriel entered behind me. He did not stand at my side. That was part of the plan, but my body did not know the difference. Richard smiled. Miss Reed, your father caused a great deal of trouble. He found the trouble. You created it. Richard's smile remained. You have his confidence. Unfortunately, confidence is expensive when it is unsupported. I placed the duplicate drive on the table. This contains the lakeshore transfers, the altered contracts, and messages from accounts controlled by your assistants. Owen moved toward it, but Richard lifted one hand and stopped him. The gesture was small. Absolute. What do you want? Richard asked. My father's name cleared. Every false record corrected. Every debt my family carried because of your actions repaid. And in return, I give you this copy and disappear from your business." Richard looked toward Gabriel. Can she be trusted? Gabriel's voice was colder than I had ever heard it. No, the word struck exactly as planned, yet it still hurt. Richard leaned back, satisfied. "Then surrender her documents to me, Gabriel. I will handle the matter privately." Gabriel looked at me. For one terrible second, I could not read him. "Take them," he said. Owen stepped toward the drive. I forced myself not to move. Richard picked it up and examined it. "Daniel believed Thomas would save him," he said. "Thomas believed Gabriel would save the family. Men become foolish when they confuse affection with loyalty. You used my father's credentials to move the money," I said. "That detail was never released publicly." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Your father gave you more than a key. Did you change the access logs before or after Lakeshore reported him?" "The logs were corrected to reflect what the company needed them to reflect." "By you?" "By people who understood their responsibilities. People who answered to you." Richard glanced at Gabriel with open contempt. Gabriel knew what I allowed him to know. That is why the company survived. The admission settled over the room. Every word was being preserved now. Richard continued because power had made him careless. Thomas found the accounts, but finding them was not what ended his control. He confronted Owen. Gabriel's expression changed. Owen looked away from the windows. Richard smiled at the silence he had created. "You still have not told him, have you?" he asked Owen. "You were the last person to see your father before his car left the estate." Owen did not answer. The silence around him became its own confession. Gabriel remained near the end of the table, motionless except for the slow rise of his chest. "What happened that night?" he asked. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Owen looked toward Richard before looking at his brother. That was all Gabriel needed to see. "Tell him," I said. Owen pressed both hands against the back of a chair. "Father came to the estate with copies of the accounts. He said Richard had used company money for years. He planned to meet investigators the next morning. And you stopped him," Gabriel said. "I tried to make him wait. Richard told me the family would collapse. He said thousands of employees would lose their jobs and every institution connected to us would turn against us. I believed him." Richard gave a small sigh, as though Owen had disappointed him by explaining too much. "Your father was prepared to destroy everything generations of Callahans had built. He was prepared to tell the truth," Gabriel said. Richard's expression hardened. "Truth is a luxury for people who do not carry responsibility." "No," I said. "That is what powerful people say when responsibility finally reaches them." Richard looked at me as if he had forgotten I was still there. "Your father had the same weakness. He believed being right would protect him. He believed your family would honor its own rules. Then he was naive." Gabriel stepped closer to the table. "What did Owen do?" Richard did not answer. "Owen did. I removed the file from father's car. I thought that if he had no proof with him, he would return home and reconsider. He drove away without it. The accident happened later that night. I told myself the missing file had nothing to do with his death, but I knew I had taken away his chance to expose Richard. After father died, you let me believe an outsider had betrayed him," Gabriel said. Owen looked down. "Richard said the truth would tear us apart. The lie did that." Gabriel's gaze shifted toward the duplicate drive. "How did the watch reach Miller's?" Owen closed his eyes. "I placed it there." Gabriel went completely still. "You?" "Last week, I heard Richard discussing the final transfer. I searched his private office and found father's watch locked inside a desk compartment. I knew you met Mason at Miller's when you wanted to speak away from the company. Richard's old file on Daniel listed Hannah's current employer. I arranged for the watch to be placed beneath booth 7 before you arrived. I stared at him. You knew I would find it. I hoped you would return it. Your father had trusted you. I thought you might do what I was too afraid to do myself." "The beacon," Mason's voice said from the side doorway. "Did you know it would activate?" Owen shook his head. Richard answered for him. "Thomas installed it as part of an old family security system. When she wounded the watch, the signal reached both Gabriel's team and the network credentials I still controlled. Owen's little act of conscience told me exactly where the evidence had gone." "So you accessed my employee file?" I said. "I needed to know whether Daniel had left anything with you. You sent men to my home. They were instructed to recover property, nothing more. My mother and sister were not property." Richard's calm finally slipped. "I kept this family alive." Gabriel stepped between Richard and the table. You kept me obedient to a story you wrote. The side door opened fully. 2 federal agents entered with the company's outside counsel. They carried copies of the court authorization and search warrants obtained from the records my mother had released earlier that day. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody needed to. Richard looked toward the ceiling camera, then at the duplicate drive in his hand, and understood. You planned this, he said to Gabriel. Henna planned her part, Gabriel replied. I finally learned to stop deciding for her. The agents secured the drive and informed Richard and Owen of the next legal steps. Owen asked for an attorney and agreed to cooperate. Richard tried to speak about misunderstanding, corporate necessity, and family privilege. Each phrase sounded weaker than the last. The authority around him had depended on secrecy. Once the truth entered the room, he looked smaller. Gabriel did not stop either man from leaving with the agents. He only watched the doors close. Then the room became silent again. I expected relief. Instead, I felt tired enough to disappear. Gabriel walked to the windows. Chicago's evening lights reflected from the glass towers across the river, turning the city into a field of gold. My father knew, he said. He knew what Richard was doing, and he still waited. He may have believed he could repair it without destroying everyone around him. That delay destroyed your father's name. I held Daniel's letter inside my coat pocket. Yes. Gabriel faced me. There was no defense left in him. No polished certainty. I cannot return the years your family lost. No, I cannot make your mother forget the bills or make Emily forget what people said about your father. No, but I can correct every company record. Publicly, I can return what was taken with interest and create a fund for every employee blamed or dismissed through those companies. That will cost you. It should. 3 weeks later, Callahan Holdings released the first internal report. Daniel Reed's name was cleared in its records, and the company issued a public statement confirming that he had discovered the fraudulent transfers rather than committed them. News stations repeated what my father had tried to say for years. He found the theft. He preserved the evidence. He told the truth. My mother watched the announcement from our living room with both hands covering her mouth. Emily cried openly. I stood beside the old music box and wished my father had lived long enough to hear someone believe him. Richard faced federal charges involving fraud, obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Owen faced charges as well, but his cooperation helped investigators recover records Richard had hidden. Gabriel cooperated with every inquiry. Over the following months, he closed companies created to conceal money, removed executives who had protected Richard, and sold several Callahan properties to repay workers and families harmed by the scheme. People called it the fall of an empire. Gabriel called it an accounting. The compensation offered to my family was more money than I had ever seen on paper. We accepted what was legally owed. My mother's medical bills were paid. Emily's education was secured. The remaining money helped establish the Daniel Reed Legal Aid Fund for employees who could not afford to challenge powerful companies. I continued working at Miller's for 6 more weeks. Not because I needed to. Leaving immediately would have made it feel as though money had rewritten me. On my final night, Gabriel came in alone and sat in booth 7. He ordered coffee and waited until my shift ended. The watch rested on the table between us. Its dark steel case had been repaired. The second hand moved in a steady circle. It belongs to you, he said. It belonged to your father. My father trusted yours with the truth. Yours trusted you to finish what he could not. That still does not make it mine. Gabriel lifted the watch and placed it in my palm. You returned it when selling it could have solved every immediate problem you had. You protected the evidence when keeping it made your life more difficult. You gave my family a chance to become something better than its name. I closed my fingers around the cool metal. A watch cannot make a family better. No, but the person holding it can remind us that time does not erase what we owe. Outside, the neon sign flickered against the dark windows. The diner smelled like coffee, rain, and the first place my life had changed. Gabriel did not ask me to belong to him. He did not offer another check or promise to control the future. He only asked whether I would have breakfast with him somewhere that did not serve coffee strong enough to frighten people. I said yes. Not because he ruled half the city. Not because his name opened doors. I said yes because when the truth demanded a price, he paid it himself. I once believed the most powerful thing a person could possess was money. Then I learned it was choice. Richard chose secrecy. Owen chose fear until fear became heavier than confession. My father chose the truth even when nobody listened. Gabriel chose to surrender the empire that had taught him never to surrender anything. I chose to believe that a man was not measured by the name he inherited, but by what he was willing to give up when that name became wrong. The watch kept ticking between us, no longer counting toward danger, but counting forward into a life neither of us had planned.